Welcome to the Peoplesoft Campus Solutions Taxi Spotlight video. In this video, we will go into detail about the Australian regulatory taxi feature. We'll cover a brief overview, setup, the taxi data migration process, reporting of course and campus data, reporting of student, course admission and student enrolment data, and reporting of applications, offers and preferences. Lastly, we'll look at the notifications and purge processes. Taxi is a new Australian regulatory and legislative feature that replaces the old HEMS file-based product and uses new API endpoints created by the Department of Education and the Department of Human Services in a project beginning in 2018. Although the data being reported through Taxi is mostly the same as that reported through HEMS, the structure of the records and the method of continuously reporting and updating the data required the creation of a new solution. However, the delivered Taxi solution uses many of the existing setup pages created for HEMS reporting. The delivered Taxi processes will identify when a new record has not been previously reported to Taxi. The record with the data for each element is then posted to Taxi using the APIs. They create a UID, which is the unique ID for the data in the Taxi system. This UID is returned to Campus Solutions by the Taxi APIs and used as a link between the data held by Taxi and the data in Campus Solutions. In Campus Solutions, we store the UID along with the details of the data sent to Taxi in a transaction record, which is dated. The transaction record can then be compared to the current Campus Solutions data as it changes over time to determine if it needs to be patched. When patching data, the process uses the stored UID to identify the Taxi record being updated and sends the elements that have been changed from those previously reported. The process may encounter errors from Taxi when performing posting and patching of data. These errors are stored in a table linked to the transaction record to allow institutions to troubleshoot any issues. The delivered solution includes a number of transaction pages that allow the viewing of current CS data, previous transaction data, and current Taxi data, along with the error messages and transaction history. Institutions may wish to use Peoplesoft Analytics to manage these error messages and direct them to the appropriate data experts. To get the Taxi solution running in your Campus Solutions environment, there are several setup steps you need to take. Configuring Integration Broker is a technical exercise and should only be done by an expert. When configuring an environment to use Taxi, the routings need to be added to the delivered Taxi service operations, and user exception handling needs to be turned on in the Integration Broker. In the Integration Broker Services page, select the service SSR HEMS. You should see all the service operations that correspond to Taxi Endpoints, which is currently 51. Select the first Taxi service operation by clicking its name. On the General page, in REST-based URL, in the delivered solution, this will be the test URL. You can update the value with the production URL here. Select the Routings tab. Click Save to create the system-generated routing definition. Next, open the newly generated routing definition by clicking the definition name. The IB Routing Definitions page will appear. Select the User Exception checkbox and click Save. Repeat these steps for all the remaining service operation definitions. Details for setting up Integration Broker for Taxi are also available in the document UPD 329-25890_setup.ptf. The Taxi API Setup component allows your institution to configure and test the Taxi interface. The Taxi API Setup component can be found in the Taxi menu. Records and Enrolment, Enrolment Reporting, Oz Regulatory Reporting, Taxi. The Organisation ID and Organisation Name are the PRODA RA organisation and the organisation name assigned to your institution when you registered with PRODA. The Client ID and Software Name are provided by Oracle to your organisation. There are different IDs for test and production. We have provided unique production client IDs to each institution to minimize potential impacts from the Taxi call rate limit. Please raise a support request if you require a new client ID. On this page, provide the B2B device registration details. You will need to register each B2B device on the PRODA website. Device name and activation code are provided when you register a new B2B device in PRODA. You can enter multiple devices for each environment, but one must be marked as default. The Activate Device button is present when setting up a new B2B device. Each device only needs to be activated once. The response message will display to indicate if the activation was successful. PRODA sends a response with an expiry date and time of the device key. We store the expiry date and time and use it to determine when to automatically refresh your device key. This is done each time a Taxi API call is made. The refresh logic uses the auto-refresh keys n days before expiry field. When you are n days from the expiry date, a new key is automatically generated. By default, this field is set to 3, but your institution should make this a larger number if you run your taxi processes less frequently, to save users from having to manually reactivate. The Refresh Device Key button allows you to manually reactivate your device if for some reason the auto-refresh function has not happened. This might happen during institution holiday periods. The Authenticate Device button allows you to manually authenticate your device's connection with Taxi. The response message will indicate whether the authentication request was successful. This process establishes that you have a valid access token and happens automatically when Taxi makes an API call through a process or the transaction pages. The button is used for testing purposes to allow you to confirm your connection is working. On the campus's API test page, you will see the authentication status. This page allows users to test whether CS can connect to the Taxi system. When the device is authenticated, you can click the Get All Campuses button to retrieve a list of campuses for your institution. You can inspect the response message to determine whether the call was successful by looking in the second line for Success True. Once your device is authenticated on the Devices page, you can click Import All Errors to retrieve the list of Taxi errors. When you run the Taxi processes or use the Taxi transaction pages, you may encounter a Taxi error. When this happens, the error ID is stored with the transaction ID in the SSR HM-TX error table. If this is the first time you come across an error, the error message details are stored in the SSR HM error table. Over time, Taxi may change the description, details, and resolution of errors. This page lets your institution refresh all error descriptions, details, and resolutions by calling the Taxi Error API endpoint. The Department of Education pre-populated data from the old HEMS reporting solution into Taxi. Only portions of the pre-Taxi HEMS data have been migrated into the Taxi system. The details of the migrated data are available from the Taxi Support website, www.taxisupport.gov.au, in the document Draft HE Data Migration Guide v1.0 PDF. The migration process matches local CS data to Taxi data, creates a transaction record, and stores the Taxi UID. The process can be run multiple times and can be used to import students that existed in HEMS and have returned after Taxi was implemented. The pre-populated data created in Taxi has a unique identifier, UID, which is used to identify a record. The Campus Solutions processes can use a record's UID to update and delete an existing record. The migration process matches the Taxi data with the Campus Solutions data and stores the UID and current Taxi data that can be used in Taxi reporting moving forward. The process allows you to select a transaction date that will be written to the transaction tables. Processes will use this date to compare when CS student data has been added or updated to determine if any changes have been made since the transaction date. Include in processing allows the users to select which records they want to migrate. When you select students, course admissions, and unit enrollments, you must select population selection so you can identify a smaller set of data to import. The Use Short Description to Match option is used for Taxi course of study based on the program's short description. Use this if your institution previously reported to HEMS using the course short description instead of the course ID. Population selection is used to select the IDs of students which you wish to migrate. PS Query can be used to target groups of students. The migration process is designed to be run multiple times. Initially, you may only migrate current students. The process can then be run again in the future for students returning from long absences to migrate their student data. An example of student data migration. A student previously reported through HEAMS will be pre-populated in TAXI with a UID and the E313 student identification code, which is the Campus Solutions EMPL ID. Population selection uses a PS query to specify a set of records for migration using bind record SSR HM BND STU, data migration bind record. Use a query when importing data about students, course admissions, and unit enrollments. This allows institutions to run the migration process against smaller chunks of data. You can also use a query to identify students using a specific set of criteria. For example, import data only for students who are currently active or those who have been active for the last 3 years. The TAXI solution includes 3 processes that identify new and change data, and then post, patch, or occasionally delete the related TAXI data. The TCSI Campus Program process allows users to submit new or update existing campus, course of study, course, or course on campus records to TCSI. Note that courses are called programs in Campus Solutions. As the process goes through the records selected for processing, there is a related view that maps CS data to the TCSI record. For each record, the process looks at the related view to determine if there are new or updated rows. As this type of data does not have add update dates in Campus Solutions, it will compare the data for all records each time it is run, and not just for records that have been updated since the last transaction date. When a new record is found, a post call is made using the data in the view. This creates an entry for the record in TCSI. When posting is successful, TCSI responds with the UID that it assigned to the record. Campus Solutions stores this UID in a table, and the data that was submitted is written to the transaction data table for that record. When posting is unsuccessful, the record you submitted is still written to the transaction data tables, but no UID is stored. The accompanying error message is stored in the error table. When an updated record is found, a patch call is made using the data from the view and the UID from the UID table. This updates the existing record in TCSI. When patching is successful, the data you submitted is written to the transaction data table. When patching is unsuccessful, the data you submitted is still written to the transaction data table, and an error message is written to the error table. The records per post request parameter allows the user to control how many records are included in each JSON request. The process can handle a large number of post and patch transactions in a process run. This parameter allows institutions to break this up into smaller sets to ensure the transactions are processed correctly without timeouts occurring. The process can be run for campus, course of study, course, and course on campus records separately or together. The provider type parameter allows institutions to choose between reporting HEP and VET data. HEP data includes campus, course of study, course, and course on campus records. VET data includes campus and course records with the appropriate VET elements. It is expected that this process will be run periodically by institutions to pick up new and updated records. This data would all need to be reported to TCSI before attempting to record student course admissions, which require the parent course record. The delivered TCSI solution includes transaction pages that allow users to view and maintain single TCSI records. The bulk of the TCSI processing will be done through the processes. The transaction pages allow troubleshooting of issues and performing some actions, such as delete, which the processes do not do. The TCSI transaction page can be found in the Transaction Maintenance menu, Records and Enrolment, Enrolment Reporting, Oz Regulatory Reporting, TCSI, Transaction Maintenance. All of the transaction pages have a similar design, and I will explain their features here using the TCSI Campus Transaction page as an example. The top of the TCSI Campus Transaction page has the Campus Solutions key data for the record. Below that is the transaction data including the UID of the record and the UID of any parent records. The grid section displays all of the elements for the record, with the currently derived Campus Solutions data, the data that was stored from the last transaction, and the data from TCSI that is returned by clicking the Get button. If there are any differences between the data in each column, the element name is highlighted. Below the grid is a group of contextual buttons, which will be displayed based on the current state of the data. This record has been posted, so the Get and Delete buttons are there. There is current data that does not match either the last transaction data or the current data from Taxi, so the Patch button is displayed. The response text box shows the messages received back from Taxi API calls when a post, patch, get, or delete are performed. The transaction details show a history of post, patch, match, and delete transactions that have occurred for this record over time. This area will also display any error or warning messages received from Taxi for this record. This campus record has not been posted. There is no UID displayed, and the post button is enabled. When the post button is clicked, the Taxi Campus endpoint is used to post this record to Taxi. The element data sent is shown in the current data column. If the post request is successful, a message will be displayed. The transaction details, including the UID, are now displayed along with the data from the transaction record that was created. The response text shows the message received back from Taxi. Note the transaction data will appear in the transaction details area after the page is refreshed. On returning to the page after updating the data in Campus Solutions, we can see that the campus postcode element is highlighted, as the current data is now different from the last transaction data we stored when we posted it to Taxi. By clicking the Get button, we fetch the data held by Taxi for this UID, and is the same as the last transaction data, but different from the current data. As there is a difference in the data identified on the page, the Patch button is displayed. When the Patch button is clicked, the Taxi Campus endpoint is used to patch this record to Taxi, identifying it by the UID. The updated element data sent is shown in the current data column. If the patch request is successful, a message will be displayed in the response text. The data from the new patch transaction record that was created is displayed. The transaction details area shows the history of post and patch transactions. Clicking the Get button confirms that the data has been patched at Taxi, and the data is now back in sync. On rare occasions, it may be necessary to delete a record you have sent to Taxi. Not all Taxi records can be deleted, and this should only be done by authorized personnel. When the Delete button is clicked, the Taxi Campus endpoint is used to delete this record, identifying it by its UID. A transaction record is stored and flagged as deleted, and it will no longer be picked up by the Taxi Campus program process. If the delete request is successful, a message will be displayed in the response text. You can see in the transaction details the history of the post, patch, and deletion of this record. You can see in the corner of the page that there are now 2 rows. The deleted row is visible to show the history for this record, and another row is available to allow you to post this record again if necessary. The transaction pages are used for troubleshooting, and here we see an example of an error message. These errors, indicating a record already exists, are handled as special cases in the transaction pages and processes. During the post request, Taxi has identified an existing record with the same Campus Solutions key data, which is suburb and postcode. In the response, Taxi returns an error message, which includes the UID for the existing record. The transaction pages and processes will store this UID and get the current Taxi data to create a matching transaction record. This transaction record is backdated so that any differences in the data that may exist will be picked up by the data processors automatically. The new campus location page can be found in the Oz Regulatory Setup menu here. The Taxi solution reuses many of the setup pages created for the previous HEME solution. A number of new setup pages have been added to support Taxi. The delivered Taxi solution uses Campus Solutions locations for campuses. There is a new page, Campus Location, which is used to identify the locations to be used as Taxi campuses. The provider type identifies HEP or VET campuses, so the correct elements are reported for each. The Taxi Program of Study transaction page allows users to maintain and troubleshoot individual records that are sent to Taxi. In the delivered functionality, Campus Solutions Program represent Taxi courses of study. This page works in the same way as the Taxi Campus Transaction page and the other transaction pages. Course of study is reported for HEP institutions only. The TCSI Program Transaction page allows users to maintain and troubleshoot individual records that are sent to TCSI. Note that Campus Solutions programs and plans are the equivalent to TCSI courses. This page works in a similar way to the TCSI Campus Transaction page and the other transaction pages. This record has some features we haven't seen. The TCSI course record is a child of the course of study record, so the UID of the parent course of study is displayed. Before you can post a course, the parent course of study must be posted. The TCSI courses group has child records, field of education and special interest course, and they are displayed in subpages that can be accessed through these links, which are only displayed when data is available. Clicking the Special Interest Program link opens the child page displaying the details for the TCSI Special Interest course. These child pages work in a similar way to the TCSI Campus Transaction page and the other transaction pages. The Post button allows the child records to be posted individually. It should be noted that the parent record must be posted first, and any existing child records will be posted automatically with the parent record. Clicking the Field of Education link opens this child page. There are a few things to note here. This data was migrated using the TCSI migration process. This is indicated by the Match transaction row. The Field of Education records can change over time and have an effective from date. There are 4 rows here showing the history of the field of education for this program. As the data for this program changes over time, it can be manually patched in this page, or the updated records will be picked up by running the TCSI Campus Program process. Program on Campus, or TCSI Course on Campus, was not supported in the previous HEAM solution. To support it, a new page has been added to the Oz Regulatory Report Setup menu. The main Program on Campus record is effective dated in Campus Solutions, but effective from date is not part of the TCSI Course on Campus unique key, so adding new effective dated rows has been disabled here. The course fees can change over time using the course fee effective from date. The first course fee record must have a course fee effective from date that matches the effective date of the parent Course on Campus record. Course fees are changed over time by adding a new row with the later course fee effective from date. When adding new Program on Campus records, the Copy button is enabled. This allows you to select an existing record of a similar program and copy the details. After copying, you can edit the data before saving. You may need to correct the effective dates, and will need to ensure the first course fee record must have a course fee effective from date that matches the effective date of the Course on Campus record. When viewing an existing record, the Import and Import Course Fee buttons are enabled. The Import button allows you to import a complete Program on Campus record from a comma-separated file. The file includes a header row and any number of comma-separated data rows. The file includes the first course fee record, which is given the same effective date as the parent record. The Import Course Fee button allows you to import just the new course fee values for existing Program on Campus records as they change over time. The file includes a header row and any number of comma-separated data rows. The TCSI Program on Campus transaction page allows users to maintain and troubleshoot individual records that are sent to TCSI. This page works the same way as the TCSI Campus Transactions page and the other transaction pages. TCSI Course on Campus is reported for HEP institutions only. This transaction page reports data straight from the Program on Campus page shown previously. There are links to the Child Campus Fee and TAC Offer Code pages. The TAC data is similar to some other data reported to TCSI. There is no effective dating, and the only data reported is the TAC Offer Code. There are multiple rows for different TAC Offer Codes. When a change is made in the Program on Campus page to add or remove a TAC Offer Code, the TCSI Campus Program process will post a new TAC Offer Code record to TCSI or delete the removed row from TCSI. The Campus Course Fee Child transaction page. There are 2 rows here for the 2 effective from dated rows. To support higher education, vocation education and training, and dual sector institutions, a new page was added to the academic career table component. Each academic career can be identified as either higher education, vocational education and training, or not applicable, if you do not need to report it to TAXI. The TAXI student data process, also known as the Student Course Admissions Unit Enrolment Data Transfer process, handles many of the most important and frequently performed tasks. It is the core of the delivered TAXI solution. The data transfer process goes through all of the records you include in processing. If a transaction record and UID does not exist for the record, the element value is derived from CS and posted to TAXI. If a transaction record and UID exist, and if there have been updates to the CS records after the transaction date, the element values are derived from CS and any updated element values are submitted to TAXI. Select your academic institution and provider type, HEP or VET. This controls what endpoints and data are included. For dual sector providers, you need to run the processes separately for your HEP and VET students. The record per post request parameter allows the user to control how many records are included in each JSON request. The process can handle large numbers of posts and patch transactions in a single process run. This parameter allows institutions to break this up into smaller sets to ensure the transactions are processed correctly without timeouts occurring. The Update All Records checkbox forces the current CS data to be derived and compares it to the last transaction data to determine if any changes need to be patched. This skips the logic that selects records based on whether the CS record has a more recent add update date time than the last transaction date time. Use this feature when you believe some updates may have been missed in regular processing. The Force Patch checkbox can be used in conjunction with the Update All Records checkbox and send a patch request regardless of whether any update elements are identified when the current CS data and the last transaction data are compared. Use this feature when you believe some of your data and the data held by TAXI has fallen out of sync. The census start date and end date range are required to target the data your institution wants to report to TAXI. For nightly runs, it's expected that this will cover the current term and the next term. When reporting changes to specific data that was previously reported to TAXI, revisions, this date range could span several years, and you can select the student population using Pierce query. Population selection is the method for selecting the IDs to process for a specific transaction to narrow down the number of records the process considers. When this checkbox is unchecked, the student data process finds the student population using the census start date and census end date. A student career is included in the process if it falls under one of these conditions. A related enrolment with a census date that falls between the census start and end dates. A student program plan record within a midterm with a start date that falls within the census start and end dates and has a program action of activate or matriculate. A student program plan record with an effective date that falls within the census start and end dates. When the population selection checkbox is checked, a PS query can be selected and the initial student population will be based on the student EMPL IDs, academic careers, and career numbers that the query selects. The TAXI student data process bind record has been delivered for this purpose. The Include in Processing group box allows you to select the TAXI packets you want to submit or update. Where you can choose one or more of these packets, there's an order to how submission or updates are processed. For example, in order to submit new or update existing course submissions, the student must exist, and course submissions must exist before you can create unit enrolments. When you select any one of these packets, records will be posted if there's no UID in the mapping table. Records will be patched if there's an existing UID in the mapping table and there is an update to one of the CS records. Student records are processed if the student is in the selected population and the student's checkbox is checked. The process considers the standard add and update date time columns in most tables. For person data, it also uses the last child update date time to identify updates to the person record and its child records. The data is sourced or derived from data in person regional, which is the source of the citizenship data and has new fields for USI, student data Oz, and impairment regional, where the impairment data is mapped through the disability mapping page. First reported address is the data that TAXI maintained and is populated with the address reported in the first student packet sent by the institution. When this option is checked, the process will fetch the first reported address data from TAXI and populate it into a transaction table where it can be used in data verification and other reporting. This data can be patched in the student transaction page. The Commonwealth Scholarships uses the TCSI Commonwealth Scholarships page. This page has been redesigned from the previous page so that there's one record created for each change of status sent to TCSI. The Commonwealth Scholarship change of status is reported to TCSI, and a record will be reported for every period from when it is made current until the scholarship is ended. In this example, the scholarship offer will be reported to TCSI in 2020 period 1. After the scholarship is set to current, it will be reported in 2020 period 1. It will then be reported in every period until the termination of the scholarship is reported in 2022 period 2. The Commonwealth Scholarship records are processed if the student is in the selected population and if any part of the year period falls between the census start and end dates. Course admissions records are processed if the student ID, student program, academic career, and career number are in the selected population. Most of the data comes from the academic program table, academic plan table, and the student program plan. A new page has been added to map the program action and action reason values to TCSI Program Completion Codes, element E599. The course of study commencement date E534 will use the lowest value of the start date of the midterm, the earliest start date of a related enrolment, or the HDR commencement date E534. Basis of admission comes from the action reason for the admit row for the student program. Course prior credit data is reported from transfer credit. Specializations data is from the field of education in the academic program Oz record. If the academic plan is a HEMS plan, then it is populated with the field of education from the academic plan Oz record. If the academic plan is not a HEMS plan, then it is populated with the specialization code from all of the academic plan Oz records for the student program plan. The Oz Student Program page has been updated with vet-specific fields, as well as a new group box and 2 child pages to capture higher degree by research and research scholarship data. The group box contains fields for higher degree by research, and the engagement codes are in a new page. The details of research scholarships and their stipend amounts can be captured on the new Research Scholarships page. Exit award details can be entered when the checkbox is selected in the Student Program Oz page for the Exit Award Student Program. The Source Award Student Program is selected in the Source Award field from a list of the student's programs. Exit awards will be reported when they have an effective date that falls between the census start and end dates. Aggregated awards are identified by a new checkbox on the Academic Program Oz page. These will be reported when they have an effective date that falls between the census start and end dates. Unit enrolments will be reported when the student is in the selected population and the census date for the enrolment falls within the range of the census start and end date parameters. The majority of the data will come from the enrolment tables. The unit of study commencement date, E600, unit of study census date, E489, and unit of study outcome date, E601, will derive their values from the session dates, dynamic dates, or OEE dates as appropriate. The Oz Unit Enroll page has been updated with new fields for vet reporting. 2 new setup pages have been delivered to support TCSI. The E446 Remission Reason Code Mapping page maps enrollment action reasons to TCSI remission reason codes. The E329 Mode of Attendance Code Mapping page maps instruction modes to TCSI Mode of Attendance codes. If you are a Table A or Table B provider and your institution uses AOU, the EFSL and fee amounts will be reported in separate AOU records. Institutions that do not report AOU will see the EFSL and fee amounts reported in the main unit enrollment packet. OS Help loans report data from the OS Help loan table. Records are processed if the student is in the selected population and if the incurral date falls between the census start date and end date. SA Help loans report data from the SA Help results table. Records are processed if the student is in the selected population and if the incurral date falls between the census start and end dates. The TCSI student data process does a lot of work during a run. By processing some packets separately and targeting smaller student populations, you can help decrease run times. Your institution will need to ensure the process is run frequently enough to meet taxi reporting requirements. The taxi student group transaction page works in the same manner as the other transaction pages, allowing users to view current CS data, previous transaction data, and current taxi data, and perform functions like patching, posting, and deleting. The match transaction indicates this record was created using the migration process. It is worth noting again that if during the post request, Taxi has identified an existing student record with the same Campus Solutions student ID, Taxi will return an error message which includes the UID of the existing record. The transaction pages and processes will store this UID and fetch the current taxi data for the student to create a transaction record with the current data from taxi. This transaction record is backdated to the 1st of January 1900. So any differences in the data that may exist from updates in the system since the student was originally reported will be picked up by the taxi student data process automatically. There are links for several child pages that are only displayed when data exists for the child records. The Disability Extension page reports the mapped impairment regional data. The Commonwealth Scholarship Transaction page reports the data from the new Taxi Commonwealth Scholarships page. The Citizenship Transaction page reports the data from the Person Regional page. The SA Help Loans Transaction page reports data from the SA Help Results table. The first reported address transaction page is different from the other transaction pages. Users can only get and patch data. If there is no transaction data stored in the transaction table for first reported address, the page will automatically fetch the data and store it in the transaction table when you click the link. If the current first reported address is not the desired address, the user can select another address value from the drop-down list. The new address value will be displayed in the current data column, and the elements that are different from the last transaction data will be highlighted. The Get button will fetch the current first reported address from Taxi and display it in the third column. The Patch button will send a patch request to Taxi to amend the first reported address values, and a new transaction record will be stored in Campus Solutions with the new address values. Now we can see the first reported address values have been updated. The Taxi Course Admission Transaction page allows users to maintain and troubleshoot the course admission and related records. The Swap button will be enabled when the student program stack has a deferral and a readmit with a different admit term. Clicking the Swap button will swap older midterm data with a newer midterm related to the readmission. In an update added in PUM Image 29, if there are program changes, plan changes for HEMS plans, or multiple admit terms in the student program stack, they will result in separate course admission records being posted to Taxi. Previous functionality was restricted to one course admission per student program career number. There are links to the related records that will be displayed when data exists. The Basis of Admission transaction page, Course Specializations transaction page, and OS Help transaction page all work in a similar fashion to the other pages. The Exit Awards link will appear in the course if it is being used as an exit award. Note that the exit award cannot be posted until it is completed. The Taxi Unit Enrolment transaction page allows users to view and maintain unit enrolment and AOU records. If you are a Table A or Table B provider and your institution uses AOU, the FSL and fee amounts will be reported in separate AOU records, and the AOU extension link will be displayed. Institutions that do not report AOU will see the FSL and fee amounts reported in the main unit enrolment packet and will not see an AOU extension link. The Swap button will appear after a student swaps between two classes of the same course ID. When the Swap button is clicked, the related transaction record and UID map values are updated with the new class number. There is no patch to Taxi as the course ID remains the same. The Taxi Aggregated Award Transactions page allows users to view, post, patch, and delete the aggregate award records. This has a child page for specializations. The Taxi Application Offers and Preferences process allows institutions to report their application data to Taxi. When moving to Taxi, the Applications, Offers, and Preferences had few changes from the HEMS solution it replaced. The delivered Campus Solutions functionality uses many of the existing setup features from the old HEAM solution. This includes the applications and offers profiles. The new application and offer year page allows users to define the taxi reporting reference years and their associated reference date, current year 12 year, and a list of the emit terms that belong to the year. These were entered as parameters on the previous HEAMs processed and early versions of the taxi solution. This setup data is used by both the taxi application offers and preferences process and the transaction page to ensure consistent results. The process can identify the population of applications by the parameters and the associated application and offers profiles settings. Or population selection can be used to target smaller groups of applications using P as query. A bind record has been delivered, SSR HM AOP BND, apps bind record, which selects the student ID, academic career, student career number, and application number. The Taxi Apps, Offers and Prefs Transactions page allows users to view and maintain records on an individual basis as required. The Taxi Notifications process allows institutions to periodically fetch the notifications from Taxi. Taxi uses notifications to convey messages when real-time messaging is not possible, where the system needs to call on another system, such as ATO systems, or data issues are identified by system-generated processes. This process can check and fetch the messages from the Taxi system into Campus Solutions. The updated version of the notification process allows users to specify which notification categories they want to fetch. With Get Current Notifications, you can fetch unread notifications which have not been fetched by the institution before for the specified categories. Or, with Get All Notifications, they can choose to fetch all of the notifications from a specified date for the specified categories. The notifications are stored in the Notification Transaction Table, SSR HM NOTIF. Institutions may wish to use Peoplesoft Analytics to manage these messages and direct them to the appropriate data experts. In the future, there are plans to add notifications to a number of the transaction pages to allow the viewing of notifications in the context of the transaction data. While processing numerous requests, the delivered taxi solution generates many rows of transaction and related data, such as error messages and the JSON objects for each request. These consume storage resources over time. The taxi purge process allows institutions to control the volume of historic taxi transaction and related records. The process runs in three modes. Purge transactions by count allows the user to specify how many old transactions to keep for each record. At least one, the most current successful transaction, must be kept for the system to continue to function. Purge transactions by days allows the user to specify a number of days, and any transactions older than that number of days will be deleted. Again, at least one, the most current successful transaction, must be kept for the system to identify changes over time. Unsuccessful only deletes transactions related to records which did not result in a successful taxi request due to errors or communications issues. For each of these three modes, the user can specify which records to include in the purge. Thank you for listening to the Campus Solutions Taxi Spotlight, and we hope you'll join us again.